So to start out, it would be great to hear a little bit about how I Heart Girl started, how Jessica found the models, and I'll let you take it from here.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. Hi. Hi. Thanks for coming. So I guess I'll start at the beginning. I came to New York about 2007, and I came here to go to graduate school. My background was in painting and drawing, and applied. I was an applied artist, and I came to New York to continue being an artist. And while I was in graduate school, I continued the process of what I was doing as an applied artist, which was studying the human body, just really focusing on the form, drawing, painting, still life, but really rooted in this idea of exploration of the form, and really starting to branch out on those ideas. When I got here, I just began to photograph people that I met, people that I was peers, people that I was going to school with, lovers, lots of fellow artists, and people that I just met along the way. And while I was in school, I was working on a lot of performance art with, I would say, lots of male nudity, and I would, photograph male nudes live and made it sort of performative. But as I was doing this, I really amassed a large archive of portraits of people, and they weren't only men, they were women as well. But because I was focusing in so much on male nudity, I felt like that's why I Heart Boy was the first book, and that's how it came together. And I think it's important to think about male nudity in terms of just our relationship to it, and how we don't see it as often as we do with female nudity. We look at the female nude as art, but still we're like, ooh, like a little bit, thrown off when we see male nudity. So that was really the drivers behind that first book being about male nude.
Yeah, and then it took a few years, and then you started to think about I Heart Girl, and then when did you first start working on that? Or when did you first start shooting female nudes as opposed to male nudes, and start thinking of it as sort of a project, as that was a follow-up to I Heart Boy?
Well, when I started working on I Heart Boy, I was really working on I Heart Girl. I was working on both of those projects at the same time, and I always envisioned them being together. They're together now. It's nice. Yeah. They're like brother and sister.
Yeah, and you've always talked about it being two parts of a whole, and maybe an expanding whole, but it's very much one complete work.
And they do feel very similar when you flip through both books. They could be brothers and sisters. Somebody said that to me recently, that they could all be related, and I'm like, they could. That's really weird, but it's great. And I forgot what you said.
Well, I guess in the process of finding models, you talked to a lot of friends and friends. You went to, you heard from a couple agencies, and then you ended up meeting Rain. And then Rain, in a lot of ways, sort of represented what you were trying to accomplish in the book as a whole. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys first met, and then how you started working together?
Yeah.
And then
it was so romantic.
Well, I met Rain because of Lauren, my friend who's a producer. I was working on this series and starting to reshoot a lot of women that I had shot in the past, and then meeting some new people and getting some new referrals that I love. Just like people would randomly text me like a picture of someone else's Instagram saying, this person's going to call you, so you can photograph them. And so through that process, I met Lauren, and she put me in touch with an agent that had some very interesting subjects that she thought I might like to shoot, because I don't do casting, so that's how I met Rain. And when I met you, I was like, who is this wonderful being? And it just sort of like the relationship blossomed in terms of, being collaborators, making images together.
And I honestly didn't know what I was shooting for, so like the first thing that happened was like, so how much clothing will you take off?
Did I say that?
No, you did give me the look though.
I was like,
a lot
I
of
did not
eyebrow.
say that. I don't say
You were like,
that.
we'll just start here and see where it goes.
I let my subjects make their own choice in terms of, being clothed or not clothed.
Definitely. And then the briefs were definitely a part of that choice with Rain in particular.
Yeah, I showed up to the shoot not knowing that this was going to be a shoot that featured lingerie or undergarments at the time. It just said to wear comfortable undergarments, and I like briefs, especially ones with a little crotch pocket, hand warmer you can put in there. And Jessica really wanted integrity, and we shot a lot of different stuff, but it was really important to my agency that the Free the Nipple movement wasn't a part of this, unfortunately, and that all my clothing was on. And Jessica was super respectful of that, and we did all kinds of like awesome stuff. We did stuff on the floor and the wall, but the shot that she got was, it means a lot because it really says a lot about where I started in the fashion industry, and as I go forward and start doing crazy, weird, stuff with like high-end lingerie and expensive garments, I always have that image to remind myself where I come from so that I don't lose my way, and I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, when you showed up and you brought a bunch of basics and you had those briefs on, I was like, yes, more of that, and yeah.
No thongs.
No thongs, yeah.
And as you work together, how did that sort of help shape the message of the book as a whole, between what you learned from each other and then as the book ended up coming together as it is now?
Well, we yak a lot, and we have a lot of the same, I think, ideals about things. Like, we are in alignment with a lot of the same points of view, I would say.
We're like the same person, but different.
Yeah, same, but different.
Same.
So I think that it's very organic to work with you.
Yeah, and the interesting thing was, you even were sitting with me and you said you actually rearranged the images. A lot of the process of like how you wanted the book to be viewed really came after you were looking at the subjects, after the photos were taken, and sifting through all the images and putting them next to each other and seeing where they sit. And like the image that I was in, you said actually was moved in the book based on where it fit best, and you ended up putting it right next to written text, which I thought was perfect.
You needed your own moment. I felt like that image was within the book. It was like standalone, but you can't. It's really difficult, I think, to juxtapose you with any other image in the book because it's standalone. And there are several images in the book that are just standalone images for that very reason, and hers is one of them.
Yeah, and I feel like Rain as well typifies like a lot of the goals of the book, which is to show a variety of female bodies in different states of undress that just don't really fall into any easy category that is tossed around in more mainstream media. And a lot of the book and a lot of the bodies in the book kind of try to fill in like everything in between the things that we usually talk about, and whether there are words for every single type of body in the book is sort of up to anyone who views it, but it's definitely not any sort of homogenous selection of women and bodies. And I feel that was part of the goal of the book overall, just to depict a multitude of female bodies.
And Rain really epitomizes that in-between place that I think is so interesting in a lot of the work. I mean, a lot of the subjects are androgynous, the men and the women, and I feel like You can have your own book, actually.
I joked that I would be an iHeart boy had she known me earlier. Probably the
Definitely.
same briefs or maybe panties.
Definitely.
Stuffed with a Twinkie.
Yeah. Whatever.
Intimate conversation we're going to have here.
Well, the pictures are intimate.
Well, speaking of someone who could have been in both books, you had a really interesting anecdote that you mentioned to me about somebody who missed the boat to be in this book, but I thought it was really, really special as far as like the integrity of identity in your books, and I thought it would be cool if you shared that story.
Yeah, so I photographed a subject for iHeart Boy many years ago, and he is now, or she is transitioning, and contacted me like recently. I shoot her from time to time, but she was like, do I still have time to be an iHeart Girl? And she missed the deadline to be in the book, but she's going to be in the exhibition. So it's really cool too. Like I was thinking about how, there's subjects of a certain age, a lot of them in the book, and it's like that time period where like within 5 years you can look like a completely different person, I think. And she's a completely different person. She's the same person, but she is identifying as something else now and sees herself being suited in this book, which is really beautiful, and I like completely embrace that.
Yeah. And then that goes more towards, again, sort of how this book is to be seen and taken as a whole as part of iHeart Boy, which was the first, just where the project began, which is now years in the making, just between the poses of the subjects and the fact that they were shot literally in the same place in your apartment in Brooklyn, often in the same lighting. And I mean, I think the fact that some of the poses in particular are similar is interesting as far as sort of showing how male and female bodies can be similar, and it highlights their differences as well, but it also shows them in this new light, both by highlighting their similarities and maybe acknowledging their differences.
Well, we can all be vulnerable human beings, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's
Exactly.
the lens that I view all of the subjects through, whether they're, men, women, children, my parents. I see them in the same way. I think it's really the aesthetic and the compositions that are making them feel so similar, but it's also the way that they are when they're in my space. We're making these images together. We're collaborating on it. We're getting comfortable in your briefs.
Yeah.
Like a lot of my shoots are about, I feel like I don't shoot until the very end of a session because I just talk so much to the subjects.
You're doing a great job.
We just talk a lot, and then we sort of just make the images at the end of the shoot.
Yeah. Can you speak to kind of the aesthetic that you've mentioned before, that you think a lot about how to portray the subjects in this way? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I love simplicity, and
Definitely.
I think that both of the series are very simple and pared down, and furniture it's like sparse. But I think the reason why I think they all look very similar and very like aesthetically, I think I have to attribute that to my background in painting, sitting and painting, people and painting still lifes. There is a lot of care and attention that goes into that type of art making, and when you're working with a human, a person, a live model, that doesn't change. To me, it's the same thing. You take the same care and attention, and you compose the shot with somebody, and you see how they're sitting, if they're comfortable, if the light is hitting them just right, and you play with their eye direction. And so it is a process. It's just like setting up flowers to paint. Really, that's the way that I look at it.
I'm a really big flower.
Yeah, you are a wildflower.
A lot of personality. And one of the things that makes our images so striking is just the composition is it is very simple, but and at the same time very appealing, it just makes every single one a pleasure to look at. And even in the layout of I Heart Girl, there's a certain spread where there are portraits of women facing sort of at a 3/4 angle across the page, and it's just obviously a lot of different models with very different looks, but it's a very appealing and very interesting spread, because you can sort of take it as this whole and just see this grid of faces, lit similarly, hair usually down, but if you take a look at each one, you start to see these differences, and it just, like, you can look at it for hours, just sort of like going from photo to photo. So that's like another very interesting thing, as well, in terms of how you style, I guess, and consider composition in your photographs.
It's a lot of eye styling.
Yes.
It's like look here, look higher, look lower. But I love like 3/4 bust portraits. I think that those are just really beautiful. Like to see that even like through art history, when you see sculptures and it's just like from here up, it's I can't get enough of that. That's why there's a whole grid of the women, like bust portraits like that, and men too. And like I think I just took like tons of rolls of just bust portraits of you. So, yeah.
But one of the things that came up sort of in talking about I Heart Boy and I Heart Girl, and then Rain's role in I Heart Girl, was how she has had the experience of modeling as both a man and a woman, or in menswear and in women's wear and everything in between, and how that has impacted her career, or how that has sort of traced or pointed her trajectory in fashion, and also how that affects her life when she's not like among fashion people as well.
So basically, I'm a human born with female anatomical capacities, but when I put on a suit and tie, my vagina does not fall off. So therefore, by the rule of, if you want to call it anatomical identification, you would say that it becomes women's wear by default. But it's been a very interesting thing, because most people judge what they think I am based on what I'm wearing and how much of my niblets I'm showing and all that good stuff. That kind of tells you little telltale signs of whether or not this is, an insert or like a going to insert into you kind of a situation. And I say this in a silly way just so no one falls asleep, but I could say it in long words and stuff like that. The interesting thing about these books is that I could probably be in both of them if you just shoot it the right way. And that's because people have expectations on what they think a specific sex should be based on visual. We brought in this very interesting conversation about gender, which is kind of a new thing to talk about, even though it's existed through various religions and other conversations in other cultures around the world. In America, this is kind of a new thing. It's like, gender, what do we do with it? What is that thing? And people are trying to make gender like this scientific thing that you can you can say like, oh, like in the definition of this is female gender, this is male gender, and there's like all kinds of gender. But it's really a personal relationship with yourself and the people around you, and none of it is wrong. And that's kind of what happens in these books, is your relationship with the people in the book, and your interpretation of what they are and how they identify and things like that. Everything that you believe this book to be is absolutely 100% correct. And that's how I treat my everyday life. You call me sir, that's fine. It's just a sound. It's nice to be a white man in America. You get a lot of stuff out of it. But then again, you get pulled over by a police officer, and these things come out really fast. And it's a little bit, it's a little bit of capitalism and taking advantage of a, system. But I take advantage of it so people can get upset about the fact that there's something to take advantage of, because we're not being treated equally. And this is something that really, no pun intended, strips people down to their basic and allows you to just see them for what it is. And there's nothing to kind of like tell you what they're into or what they're not into, because most of them are not wearing clothing. And we were talking about something, and I hope you don't mind if I bring this up, but we're talking about the difference between the nudity and nakedness. And I thought this was really interesting because Rachel looked up the difference between nudity and nakedness. When I got involved with this project, my mother looked up this young lady here and was like, you're gonna be naked on this thing? You know, you might have children that are gonna like maybe masturbate to this book. But looking at, you know, I mean, that's a real cause, you know, it's all out there. But when I looked through, I was like, it was not a fear of mine because this isn't like a sex-based book. This isn't like, it isn't like that. You know, it's a form of art, and you look at things like Instagram and stuff like that, and you can't even show like a little button on, you know, heaven forbid your lactation, you know, spaces cause somebody to get a boner or something, and like, I don't know, veer off the road. But we were talking about last night in regards to that, some of the images were considered kind of off-putting to some people, like the fact that I'm wearing briefs in there and there's a little bulge in the brief by accident, just the way I'm standing, and it does maybe look like there might be some little, either my clit's too big or it's like an extra thing in there. Everybody's over 18 in here, yep. Right? But then we also have things like there's a woman breastfeeding in this, and then we have someone that you might consider to be, and I hate labels, but I'm just going to say it for layman's terms, you know, maybe like a butch, who's wearing they're kind of wearing their, you know, pants, and they have these very voluptuous breasts, and they, you know, they have a very curvaceous body, and it's really beautiful. And why are these images so off-putting? And I was saying it's probably because you're going to have some people who will buy this as a coffee table book and appreciate it for the art and the statement, but you will also have people that are going to be like, yeah, oh my God, ew, baby, you know, and they're going to keep going. So it's about like a personal interpretation, and it's about like understanding the intent, and the intent is whatever you want it to be. Yeah, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that. But.
Well, when you were saying that, when we were talking about that the other night, I was thinking that is something interesting as an artist to experience, that you're making work, so to speak, in a bubble a little bit, hopefully, if you're, you know, trying to be honest and truthful about what your desires are as an artist. And you put it all together, and then when other people see it, you can kind of see that we have a lot of work to do in terms of in the way that we come in contact with the male or the female body in media and the female image. And I don't know, I think when you juxtapose a feminine, you know, looking woman with another woman who could pass as a guy, it disturbs people because they think, hey, I was looking at a book of women. What are you doing to me? And it kind of, you know, messes people up a little bit, but I think that's okay. Like, I think we should be messed up a little bit because it's like keeps building and building, and people become more tolerant over time, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it fills in this very vast gray area as well between like culturally extreme examples of like traditional masculinity and culturally extreme examples of like traditional femininity. And like part of what this book does is kind of fill in a lot of things in between that, I feel. And just as I was saying before, just like presents bodies that are not
I would like to say monetized,
skinny,
to be
or
honest.
monetized.
I mean, like, because this really comes down to almost like advertising and cultural things, right? Cultural expectations of what is beautiful and what is attractive.
Yeah.
And I mean, I look very feminine because I am a female. Or I'm a human, you know, I look very human. But like when you put all these images together and they're all representative of like one particular, like it's basically like the only thing that all these people have in common is that they all have, you know, female anatomical structures, and that's it. And because they have those things, every single person in that book is feminine. Even if you're like, oh, but they look masculine, no, they don't. And it's about redefining that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about opening up as well, like what feminine can be, and like making the definitions of feminine infinite as well as the definitions of masculine.
Exactly, yeah.
That's why the photographs are great.
I feel like we're shifting, there's more gender fluidity happening. Be interested to see where it goes.
Yeah.
Like in the next decade.
Yeah. No, it's been, I feel like even this summer has just been so rapidly, there's been so much discussion about just like what it means to be, not to throw out a platitude, but what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a man. And, we're moving very quickly forward, I think, faster than we have in decades about those definitions and that binary.
We're moving towards, I would hope, pardon, what it is to be a human being.
And what it is to be a human being.
And that's what I think is the most important part of it. So, you can separate the projects into two different books, but they're both the same thing.
Exactly. And it brings up, hopefully, like the ultimate goal, like we all are able to treat each other as people before we even consider gender. And so treating each other as humans becomes first priority, and then gender is secondary to like the fact that we're all human.
Yeah, it's like, why are people so obsessed with their genitalia? It's
Very
like
good point.
It should just be really about your capability. And that's kind of what it comes down to. It's like, at the end of the day, can the person carry you out of the burning building or not? Because I know a lot of twinks that would, I'm dead. They leave me there. They don't want to break a nail. Like, they keep going, and it,
Wait, Brain, is it just like a internet myth that you were a firefighter?
Oh, the
You are
internet.
chopping wood a lot on Instagram.
I should. Yes, me and that wood. I'm right down to town on that. I was a firefighter. I did have the experience of, I went into a firefighting training, and I saw that there were like 3 women, and there were like 80 guys, and the women were highly, highly sexualized and put aside based on their looks, and they just weren't helped out as much. They were like pushed out of line for food, they were talked about, they were isolated, and everyone thought it was a guy. Like when I walked in, because you were wearing all this stuff for wintertime. So I spent 8 months as a male firefighter, and no one even asked if I was gay. It was really awkward. Like one time we all like went and drank, and like everybody peed off the cliff together, and it was like, I was just like scooping away. Like I didn't know what to do. It was like, I got called like a hobo for a little while. And like when people finally found out later on after the firefighting stint that I was female, a lot of them were like, that's not possible. We saw his dick was huge. He had to hold it with 2 hands because I'm doing this. They're like, dude, more than twice and you're playing with it. I don't know what you're doing with that. But yeah, that's true.
Okay, just
Side story.
But yeah, back to nudity versus nakedness. Like,
It's hard to follow it from that one.
I think it's fair to note that a big reason why we're moving forward and with the idea of like this fluidity, it's not gender fluidity, it's just personal fluidity because of the internet. I think that we can all say that you don't really know if anyone's real or not real or what's going on the internet. And we have 2 personas. We have you right now, and then you in like 20 minutes when you pick up your iPhone. And even Siri, it has no sex. Which I think is very interesting. Even, Apple products are starting to brainwash us. I mean, tell us to go towards a more neutral space. But once you go online, you can be anything, and you're limitless. Mm-hmm. You could be whatever you say you are until someone says you aren't or deletes your account. So, I mean, I feel like that's actually, and the spreading of information very swiftly through social media is like, that's the reason why this combination of books is really going to, I think, be more effective than it was before.
Definitely. Agree.
And scene. Your turn.
Jessica, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about how it is about people growing into themselves and accepting who they are, and that's the internet. It just becomes, I think, easier in a lot of ways to grow into yourself. Like you can be this other persona, but now since just the proliferation of imagery or people sharing pictures of themselves online or expressing themselves how they see fit, people are starting to get on board with, oh, that's okay. And when they see that they're being validated online, then they can kind of step into their real life, I think. It's more now so than ever, I think, that I'm seeing that happen.
Yeah, and people can find like-minded people who,
Right.
whether or not they have the exact sort of same personal identity, will support that identity and support like someone going out in the real world and actually acting it out. And it doesn't have to be like someone in the physical world only searching for like-minded people. It's easy to find so many people who would also support someone acting,
Being themselves.
being themselves. Exactly.
Do you feel, Jessica, that because you will be connected to the world the minute you pick up your phone, and because people are more worldly, that people are limiting artists because they're expecting them to be more worldly through their art? Like, do you feel that people have different expectations of your art just because we do have a wider array of images now available to us?
So you mean in terms of like censorship?
Yeah, like censorship and, varietal, like, do you feel like people would be less understanding of a localized selection of your models and like expect a more worldly selection, or do you feel like
I mean, that's something that I encountered a little bit on the first book, like diversity, but I think it's important to point out that these are people that I know. They're friends of mine, so I'm not the kind of artist, I guess, that, surveys the entire female and male population, and if I did, I'd be very busy. So, and I'm busy enough just, in my own backyard. That's what you were saying earlier, in my own backyard. It's in my apartment, but definitely.
It's a fruit salad thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I only prompted that question because I remember we were talking about people mentioning, various elements of the book. They might not understand that it is a localized population. So for anyone who hasn't seen the book, it's a local selection of friends, and and that's as honest as it gets. It wasn't like, this person went on Craigslist and tried to look for a representation of every single person that's out there. And artists these days are not allowed to be as honest as they used to be because they have to be so PC. But they
have to conform too.
You have to conform, and yeah, exactly. But it's like, she made you a fruit salad out of stuff that she got in her backyard, not out of like the grocery store. And so like, you're not always going to find a pineapple or a kiwi, but it's a really damn good fruit salad.
It's like a macrobiotic book.
It's a macrobiotic fruit salad,
if you will.
Maybe like chia seeds to like mix it up. Or not.
They're better when they're like those clay pet things with the song.
Yeah, those are also cool.
Oh, so good.
Anyway.
We just keep throwing you off like with everything we're saying.
But yeah, we were talking about how diversity is, in this case, is more about bringing people together and Jessica's broader circle, and it is women with a wide array of physical appearances that don't really conform to labels tossed around by media or by blogs talking about like gender. It's just like there's not really, and there shouldn't be words for every single type of body type. It should just be there and should be present and should be accepted. And I would say that's what the selection of women in Jessica's book does well.
Well, a lot of the women that I shot, I think it's interesting that, I would enlist people as part of the project, and they got to choose if they felt like they identified with girl. And so it was really their choice. I invited people to be part of the project, and if they chose to pose, then that's how they felt about the project. So I feel like it is locally sourced in that way. And, I rely heavily on friends to meet new people to photograph, but a lot of it was going back and re-photographing women from college and from other projects, and like sometimes, the brothers or sisters of the boys in the book and the first book. So, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like the photographs as well show like subtle details and nuances of different bodies, which is part of how you set up the photograph, just in terms of the lighting and the simplicity of the composition. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Okay. But yeah, we were definitely overall talking about what you would like to, what would you like this book to say to viewers? Obviously, there'll be a lot of different interpretations, like Rain touched on, like how people might see it from a more pornographic view, although it is intended to be an art book, a book of artistic photographs. And I think there's a lot to be discussed of how different people might see this book. People who know Jessica's work, who don't know Jessica's work, who are interested in artistic photography, and who are interested in seeing just like naked girls. So what would you say to people who are wondering what your intentions were with the book as a whole?
Well, with I Heart Girl, I think that it's important to think about how we see women, but not how we see any particular type of woman, but more specifically that the images in the book are not retouched. They're not altered, and the women that signed up to be photographed for this project knew that was going to be the case, that they were not going to be manipulated in some way to conform to either like my artistic vision of like how I think that they should look, or how, you know, they're all going to look a certain way. There are very different looking women in the book, but they all look similar just because I'm shooting them the same way, in the same lighting, in the same poses a lot of times, and in similar clothes too. I would ask them to bring over clothing, and we would go through and like select, you know, really basic things, and they would like bring the same kind of stuff. To be fair, I asked for neutral colors because I'm not but they would bring very similar clothing. I'm like, oh, this works out. It's very, you know, typical that this would happen to me.
Yeah, and how is the experience of shooting more experienced models and maybe a few more amateur models, and then people who had just never modeled before and who were just interested in this project?
They're all very similar. I think sometimes if you're shooting a model, you have to work a little bit harder to sort of get them to drop that guard.
This face.
That guard that they hold up, and it's a you know, body, just a body position. I think that you're very studied in your body, and you know how to use it.
Aware.
Yeah.
Most people are like hyper aware. They're trying to Photoshop themselves before they even get up there, and that means they're Photoshopping themselves emotionally and physically.
Right.
So that they have the best angles for everything, and you are looking for people who are authentic. So people who are like, yeah, sure, I'll be naked in your book. I have nothing to lose, you know?
Yeah.
And I say that in a very joking way. But these people who aren't models will probably be more authentic because their reasoning behind it wasn't like, oh, this will be good for my career. They're saying this will either be good for humankind, or they really just felt comfortable with trusting your vision and what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, a lot of women had never been shot nude at all. And when I invited them to be photographed, some of the women, I assumed that I would just be taking like their portrait, and they'd keep their clothes on if they want. But sometimes they'd come to my house and be like, I want to be shot nude. I want to be naked for you. And I'm like, oh, that's really special. Like, that is something that's very sacred. And I'm glad that somebody would entrust their image, their body to me as an artist, to know that I would do justice to their beautiful form.
Yeah. And going back to the topic of nude versus naked, like Art History 101, nude is just sort of the study of the human body, like the very unemotional, just taking in the form, whereas naked is just showing that vulnerability. And I feel like you synthesize the two really well in all of your portraits, just in terms of, again, the composition, and then also being able to get a vulnerable side of people.
I mean, when I look at the images, they're not shocking to me, but
Yeah.
maybe that's because I I've seen them so many times. I've seen so many people in here right now. I've seen you guys naked. And I just think, you know, when I'm flipping through the book, they all seem nude and vulnerable, but half of them have their clothes on. So that's very interesting. So it's about like achieving that same mood throughout the book, regardless of how much clothing you're wearing, or if you're not wearing any at all. It's the same thing to me. I mean, you work with the subject, you try to curate an environment for them when you're shooting them, for them to be comfortable and really drop, you know, that guard that they have.
Yeah, and Rain, maybe you can comment on this as well. What is the conversation with subjects you have before the shoots in terms of what you are hoping to achieve in their portraits?
As in, like, what we talked about before we took the photos?
Exactly.
First of all, like, I came over and, like, I showed her a bunch of clothing, and she was like, we're using none of it. You know, the interesting thing was, ironically, at this time, I was very, very, very broke. And, like, I basically had everything with me, and it was all, like, thrift store clothing I bought, like, 3 years ago and have been recycling for a while. One item was, like, a girlfriend's, something that I took in the middle of the night and, like, left with. So it was like one of those kind of situations, you know? And I was really nervous about maybe Jessica being like, you know, well, we really were looking for something a little classier. But the conversation, she really just sat down and asked me, like, how I was doing, and she asked to see the things, and she asked me, you know, how is modeling been going, and we just kind of took a casual conversation about what we do, what we are into, what we like to do. It was very mutual, and she just, I think, got the sense that, you know, I'm not that kind of person who necessarily wants to be featured in a thong or, you know, a tank top that, you know, is super tight so that my tits are obvious. She just, like, she saw, like, this, like, I was wearing, like, this bra I'd had for, like, 2 years. And it basically is like a chest plate if you look at it. It's pretty amazing. Walmart. And, you know, I'm used to, like, fashion people being, like, very careful about what people are wearing, but she was like, this is exactly who you are. On a very basic level. And she shared enough about herself and where she's coming from that I just felt like it was a very mutual trade-off. And we were sharing a movement together. It wasn't like we were creating a fashion art. I didn't feel like I had to, like, give her the face. I didn't feel like I had to laugh uncontrollably but silently with my mouth open, bright eyes, you know what I'm talking about. I didn't even have to worry about my posture. I didn't have to worry about, you know, am I selling it sexually? You know, it was like tits first and ass out. Is that happening? No. She was just like, this is you, and that's exactly what I'm trying to sell. And I think I was really nervous about how it would turn out, and when I saw the photo, I've done a lot of shoots, and you know, even when the Vogue thing came out, and even when, like, I, you know, have worked with some of these higher end things, I think that photo is the most authentic photo I've taken so far. And only a very special photographer could take that out. And it was somebody who was trying to create a dialogue and not just create, like, a sell and buy kind of situation, even though I would buy the book.
I have something to add on to that too. The way that you describe your life in that industry, it's very hurried, it's very fast, and I feel like I am a slow person. And so if you're coming into my home or, you know, a place where I'm shooting all the time, it's about slowing down. It's about bringing things back to a somewhat centered place that you can get to in a short period of time that we're shooting, but usually it goes on for hours because we talk for like a few hours and then shoot at the end. But I think with that style or that process of working with subjects, you get a comfortable person and maybe like a more centered person when you leave my apartment. You know, you feel a little bit calmed down after being in the grind all day. And I love that. It recharges me as well as an artist. I get to learn about people like Rain and hear about her life, and it's really about working with people. And that's, I think, one of the most meaningful things about both of the projects is, you know, you let them into your apartment, but they're letting you into their life in this really, really beautiful way.
Definitely. And I feel like, again, that brings it back to how your portraits are aiming to capture someone's soul, someone's essence, more than just their physical appearance, which also ties what we were talking about, again, with gender fluidity and like this gray area and filling it in, and and just like considering the spectrum, and it's just more about the gender spectrum, and it's just kind of transcending above that to human connection, which is hopefully a wonderful goal for everyone. Yeah.
I was going to just add on to that, of just, representing people in the most honest way that I can as an artist as they come to me, and really modifying very little, almost nothing. Like when you came over, I didn't really enhance anything.
Yeah, nothing.
Didn't enhance anything, and I
didn't have to do any push-ups to get those ripples. You know what I'm talking about?
Nope, I didn't want that.
Oh.
I just wanted you the way you were. And some people are very surprised too, and I'm just like, no, just that. Or they bring a big bag of clothes, like you did, and I just end up saying, oh, just keep what you have on. And like, they're also kind of disarmed by that a little bit, I think, sometimes, and they're like, I can relax. I have to change my clothes. I could just wear this. And that lends itself to getting people to sort of just be natural and be just open.
Yeah, and even in the title, I Heart Girl, like what does everyone picture when they hear the word girl? It's probably definitely not something you'd actually see in any of the photographs in this book, and just that kind of challenges the expectation of like girl and before that boy, which is great.
I do have one final question for you. Gabrielle Blevins is an awesome friend of mine. She's amazing. She was recently featured in Teen Vogue, and she was on the cover of the book. And I was wondering, you had to go through so many images. You had to pick somebody who really represented this book and was going to entice people to even pick it up and buy it and open it. Why did you choose that face?
Oh, it was right away. I saw it when I took the picture. Like, I shot the book on film, and when I was taking that photo of her, I knew it was the cover. In my mind, I knew it was the cover, and I didn't want to jinx it because I'm superstitious, so I didn't say anything to anybody. And when I got the contact sheets back, I was like, yeah, that's still the cover. Okay, great. Like, now I can start telling people like that she's on the cover. But I did keep it a secret for a really long time, but I knew when I took that image that she was going to be on the cover. There was just something about her eyes, her gaze, very just, it represented all of the women in the book.
What was her reaction when you told her, like, it's you?
She was freaking out.
So happy.
She was so excited.
Everyone. She was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And Rain, you mentioned something interesting before about if you took the titles off, like between our I Heart Boy and Our Heart Girl, it'd be difficult to tell which one was which, like which one was the boy book and which one was the girl book, which is also...
Yeah, I mean, I think if you just took off, like, if you just called this I Heart 1 and I Heart 2, if it wasn't for the genitalia, you might be kind of a little, you'd have to really go through the book to get it. And I think that's awesome that it's kind of interchangeable. Yeah. I mean, obviously there are things and stuff out there, but especially with those headshots and those bust kind of shots, I mean,
it's very hard to tell the difference sometimes.
It's so hard to tell. Even I went through and I was really impressed because some of these people I model with professionally every day, and just the way that they were captured was extremely, I was like, my job's in jeopardy. It was actually really impressive.
Many of them were not models though in the book.
I know,
most of the book is,
but you had people like Anya was in there. And
but there's maybe like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And some of them don't even model anymore.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh.
Yeah. So.
It's really sexy.
Well, yeah, I think it's overall just a wonderful. The two books make a wonderful series overall, and it's wonderful to be able to view the product of your work over the last 5-6 years, and yeah, they just make a beautiful pair and like a beautiful whole as well.
Thank you.
Of course. I'm not sure how we are on timing, but should we open it up for questions? He's nodding emphatically.
If anybody has a question or two for anybody, I'll bring it over to you.
Hi.
I'm going to do my best to put this together without screwing it up. There we go. So from an art historical perspective, the male nude is radical and sexual, and the female nude sort of blends into the white wall. It becomes part of the gallery wall or part of the white wall in a museum. Did you find that affecting the way that you were shooting? And if you were to shoot a third one that would, sort of pop in the middle and between those, I think they're hydrangeas. I need new glasses. But if you were going to stick a third one in the middle, like what would shooting that feel like? If you had to address people who did strictly identify as androgynous and would come over and say, like, no thank you to bra armor or what have you.
Can you clarify that a little bit more? You mean, how would the subjects feel if they were mixed in with other people? Is that what you?
If the subjects refused to identify with a gender, or if did shooting them as men or women change the way that you shot them? I mean, I'm reflecting on this at least a little bit personally. I remember going to see a Sargent exhibit with an uncle of mine who was scandalized by my looking at the charcoal nudes of men, but didn't find looking at Madame X particularly sexual. And they're in similar layers of undress, but female nudes were they're just paintings,
right,
whereas male nudes were naughty. And they're all from the same period. They were all drawn by the same person, but the perspective was different based on the position of the author or the position of the artist.
Well, it's really our experience of it, and that's what is a little annoying for me, because I would like to see us all as equals, and we're not. I think when you think of male nudity in art, like paintings, sculptures, you look at it as art, but like you're saying, the female nude is it's almost forgotten about, because you see it and it's just commonplace. You see things on the internet that are like women hypersexualized, and when you see men like that, society is very quick to box it into being gay or being like homoerotic. And I don't consider my first book homoerotic at all. Like, if it were up to me, I would always show the works together because they seem similar. They're being shot by the same person. I'm seeing them in a very similar way. So for me, it doesn't really matter if it's boy or girl. It was just kind of fun to let them have their own moment individually, but I show the work together. So if somebody were to say to me, I'm being included in your boy book, but I don't want to be mixed in with the other work, then that would be like a conversation that I would have with that person. But I think for the most part, I see them blending. To me, I don't see that the male nude gets as much respect as it should. People they're put off by it, and I'm very offended by that. I think we definitely have a lot of work to do. Perhaps that's why I started with the male book, because I wanted to be like, let's start looking at male nudity, and then we can sort of try to reassess how we think about women and how we can make it so that, men don't always have the power because they're able to censor themselves, and that mystery that are shrouded in that mystery gives them more power. But women, we see them undressed all the time, and it's very easy to sexualize and demoralize us because of that. So know.
There's also a long history of the male nude, at least in Western art, being seen as like more of an academic pursuit. Like the classic Greek sculptures of male nudes were copied later because they were seen as kind of like an academic thing to pursue as an artist, whereas female bodies first were like not okay to show nude, and then slowly there was a progression towards like only female bodies nude. And so maybe by the time around, I'm not sure of the specifics, but by time of Sargent, it was maybe much more towards much more normal to portray like a female nude.
That has issues because of Victorian sexuality.
Exactly.
I think it might be an interesting note for people that in the fashion industry, men get paid 1/3 the amount that women get paid on a job. So as somebody who usually, what's up, girl? But as somebody who does do both, I'll be on a runway with someone, and they'll be like, you're going to wear menswear, which is like, well, we won't get into that conversation. That's a different panel. But the women will get paid $750, and I'll get paid $250. And I'm like, wait, no, I have these. Come back, And this is the only industry where, a black woman will make more than a white man any day of the week. And it's because of the way that we monetize our bodies and the way that we sexualize those bodies. So like male bodies, we give men a really hard time because like they have so much privilege and they're so on top of everything, but honestly they're worth way less than women are in our society, and we see that financially every single day. Even though men get paid more, they say like, salary wise, when we're talking about physically purchasing the body as a product, because like models are sold as a product, like Twinkies on a shelf or Twizzlers, they purchase the body. When you have to break it down into how much we value purchasing a human body, a female body is worth almost 3 times as much as a male body, which is such an interesting thing. Especially, I asked Jessica if there was a inflation thing that happened, but she said it's just because there's more pages, but the I Heart Girl is actually priced more than the I Heart Boy. I just thought it was funny. I was like, is this inflation?
I didn't set the price. I didn't set that price.
I know, that was funny though.
Well, and also just the fact that the images of male, Jessica's photographs of male nudes were kind of put in gay erotica, whereas I Heart Girl is getting a lot more attention, and it's just because like, oh yeah, like female nude in art, like of course taken for granted, whereas as you were saying before, like naked images of men are less like, people don't really know what to do with them as much, especially back in 2010 when the book came out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had very strong reactions to it, or they didn't even want to look at it, which is another thing. Interesting thing to think about.
Do you have one more question, maybe?
Or a compliment?
Sure. Like this guy?
Hi. So I just want to make a comment. I'm just noticing now how similar the two covers are, and I didn't realize that until right now. Like the cleft in the chin of the two models, the way the hair is parted, and like how he's looking off and she's looking you dead in the eye, which I think is really great, because it's like kind of like a fuck you, here I am, whereas the guy is kind of more soft and she's kind of like, here I am, sort of. I thought that was really beautiful, and I didn't notice that before, like when I was seeing the book. But just to make a comment, Rain, about what you were saying, how women make more than men in modeling, it's also like geared towards women. We're kind of slaves to makeup and fashion. So yeah, we're gonna spend a lot of money on the female body because that's how they kind of keep us in chains, like we're going to be spending more on women because women spend money on clothes more than men. Men have to have the clothes right in front at H&M because they won't go up the stairs. They need to have it right in their face. So it is the only industry, where we're paid more, but it's also because it's a huge industry, and men are usually buying the clothes for the women because they desire it, because we're made to desire these things.
I have an interesting little thing back at that. At the H&M on 42nd Street, the men's section is upstairs on the top floor. It is half a floor that's shared with the toddlers. Men's fashion, and like I'm pretty sure that there are more baby shirts than there are like men's variety shirts. I believe that we are all a slave of, you know, a system that was created because we don't have enough, you know, things to keep people busy, and that we don't have enough reasons to continue to work because we do have ample food production for everybody on the planet, and we do have ample resources for everyone, but we need to make it so that, you know, people stay in order because there's so many of us. I think that males have been slave to female for a long time because they have to support the whole family. They're the ones who have to go out and toil and do back-breaking labor, whereas females have to be subject to the male, they're a slave to the male because they're stuck having to deal with the fact that this person's going out breaking their back while they have to sit home and like, you know, it's basically like they're slaves to each other, you know what I mean? It's not a balanced situation. I feel like, and I only say this because I've worked so much with the males, and I think it's interesting, but when it comes to consumption, we are coming to a time where equality is happening. It's really happening. Like, we're making it happen. Let's not be all like negative about it. It's coming about. It's really cool. It's exciting. It's progressing. It's slow, but it's happening. But it's a struggle because it's a lot of people letting go of powers that they've had, privilege that they've had, male privilege of being able to dictate what is the final say on things, which it still exists, and the female privilege of being able to be like, well, I just require more maintenance, and I get more options, I get more choices, I get more shiny. When you walk into the world of accessories and fashions and things, everything is geared towards the female. It's just, even like some of the male stuff is tailored for female, because at the end of the day, it's based off of an old system that's no longer in place, where it was like, you know, this person had to go home and, you know, buy things that they'd like to see on their wife, and their wife would nag them to death if they didn't get something they liked. It's a very strange, I mean, we're in a very strange time. We can get into another conversation about it, but everybody's oppressed right now. We are oppressing ourselves, you know, and I think we're changing that. Things like this change that. These books will change that. But, you know, we can't just harp on, especially modern day men, and we can't harp on ourselves. You know, we got to be the change. Yeah. Sorry, I was a tangent about it.
Oh no, I want to add to that, even it's like also like inner work as well for everyone, and it's also being self-aware of like what maybe made you this way because you were raised as a guy or a girl, and what you would maybe like to change about that for yourself and for future generations.
Yeah, I mean, I was raised as a human being, you know, I was raised as a farm child, and it wasn't about my genitals. It was, can you pick that up or can't you pick that up? Can you split that wood? Can you not split that wood? I wasn't trying to attract anyone at that time period, you know. I just wore like whatever was a hand-me-down from either parent. It wasn't really, you know, a display of like social binaries. And so like, I get a little fluffled up because I've seen both sides, having, you know, been in that industry where it's a very like male-dominated industry. I've heard a lot of the woes of men, and, you know, there are a lot of privileges that males still have, and it's a frustration. But when I hear some of their side, I realize how much we just oppress ourselves. And like when I talk to future generations, I wish that everybody had my experience growing up. I'm still trying to find a language for it. I'm trying to get rid of the term he and she in my vocabulary, and I still find myself saying it because I want it to just be referred to as like an entity, you know, because the minute you say he or she, you divide that person's expectations of what they may be capable of for the rest of that sentence based on what you expect of a he or a she. And it's a struggle, you know, it's a struggle even I have. I've been trying to use the pronoun it as a joke, just to show people like how weird pronouns are. I like to go to restaurants and be like, can you refer to me as it instead of ma'am or sir? And they'll be like, what would it like, you know? Would it like a refill? Yes, it would. But, you know, the struggle's real. The struggle's real for all of us. I don't know. And I want people to just walk away in this next generation. I just want them to see that like we all are limitless. We are all oppressed, and we are oppressed by ourselves, and therefore we can all live a limitless existence, but we have to let go. And that's really scary because we all have to let go at the same time. And a lot of people are afraid to do that because they're afraid that they won't have what they need to survive. It's very complicated.
I agree with you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Any other questions?
All right. Hello. Well, I guess that's all we have time for tonight. Copies of I Heart Girl available in the back. I suggest you all buy it. Stick around. Jessica will be signing. Thank you guys for coming out. Have a